Watch.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of The Ravens Watch. I am your host, David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. And tonight we have an episode for you that I think is going to be a fan favorite. It's one of our favorite subjects. And as much as we've visited it on this show, it's still one of my favorite ones to bring up. And every time we talk about it, we get a new little piece of the puzzle. And I'm hoping that tonight's guest can help us to kind of create a bigger picture of what's going on here in the realm of sleep paralysis, shadow people, and the Hat Man. So let's welcome to the show, Heidi Hollis. Heidi, can you tell the audience a little bit about your work and where they can find you?
Thanks for having me on the program. I'm happy to hear people are aware of a couple of decades of work of mine in introducing both shadow people and Hat Man to the world. So so I'm that person. There's a beginning, and I wrote the book in 1997, and finally got it published in 2001. But before that, I was sending it all over the place to a lot of familiar names and authors and radio people trying to get somebody to pick it up. So people started hearing about shadow people before I put the book out. But it was an interesting ride to try to introduce something that no one had ever heard of. So I was in college and did my thing, and I've been telling and warning the world about them ever since. And people could go to my website, HeidiHollis.com, and they could also check out my podcast that is under Coast to Coast AM called Dark Becomes Light. And they can learn so much. I have so many people, thousands of people have been writing me from around the world ever since I first spoke of these creatures. And I do my best to lend some insight.
Heidi, it's interesting to hear that you've been kind of talking about this as long as you have, because when I first had any experiences that kind of moved me towards the research side of things, because I think as people have these personal experiences, whether it's with shadow people or sleep paralysis or anything really in the paranormal realm, you kind of have two options, right? And your first option is to ignore it, which a lot of people will go for that angle first, right? Ignore it. Hopefully it goes away. But if you are someone who that just doesn't quite do it and these things don't stop happening, I think typically it pushes you towards research. And so it's just interesting to know that you've been a source of information for people who may be having had these experiences over time, since the 90s, you were saying, and to think that certainly even me in my younger years when I was 16, 17 years old, more than likely probably referred to your work in trying to make sense of what was happening to me. Would you mind sharing with the audience, was there something that drove you to this point of research, kind of similarly to how I just described people having these experiences and then being moved to try to understand them and learn about them? Was there something that moved you?
A whole lot. It was something. I was raised in a haunted house. I knew what a ghost felt like and looked like. So I was quite familiar. Then I saw UFOs. I'd seen alien beings even. And but when I came across this black shadow thing following a friend of mine in broad daylight, both of us, it was following both of us walking along, and then it confronted me later. I was just beside myself. I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know what I was dealing with. And the way that it kind of built itself up to show and reveal that it was always connected to the alien phenomenon, that just really took me aback. I didn't know how to proceed in trying to decipher and protect myself from these things. It was it was really a crazy time. And then, I'm trying to describe to people what it is I'm dealing with, what I'm seeing, and the nightmares and all that. And it was just natural for me to start saying, well, shadow people. Let's just say shadow people, so I don't have to keep explaining what they look like, how they can transform, and what they can do. And then I also gave them all sorts of different subtypes and names, and one being shadow cloud. Just seeing like this dark mass, shadow streaks. You think a large bug might have gone past you, but or size of a bat or something. Then there was, I called originally head and shoulder shadow. That's the being that kind of looks like its head is directly connected to its shoulders, slanted eyes, glowing red. And then originally I called Hatman the Hatman shadow. And that's how people confuse what Hatman is today, because in the beginning, I was, trying to piece some of the stuff together. But it really became clear for myself when my college roommate and I were met with an alien being who gave us a warning and the understandings of what these things were. Now, imagine that. It's wild enough to be talking about something nobody's ever heard of, shadow people. What are you talking about? That's something of sci-fi, is what people would tell me. I'm like, well, I'm just saying, this is what I call it. This is what I see it as. And I wrote my first book in college about these creatures, and the book I was mentioning, it was called The Secret War. And I just started. It's a long, crazy story to hear, like how it originally inspired me, because I was dealing with it. I didn't know how to piece it together, but when this other being presented himself as answers to what they were, how to get rid of them, how to contain them, how they are a threat. That's what really helped inspire me, and also remembering my own connections to some of these things.
Wow, that's okay. So this is all very interesting, and I'm struggling to know where to start. I really want to hear about this entity that you communicated with. But,
yeah.
You already had your own experiences by this point, right? As essentially a frame of reference going into this interaction. Could you tell us a little bit about the nature of those?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I'll tell you the full story. I'm kind of skipping a lot around. It is a lot, and it's a big story, and I've been telling it for so long, I forget that sometimes people haven't heard the beginning. They haven't read the book that's been sitting out there for over 20 years, but they sure have ripped it off quite a bit, and the names, and, contorted the message, which is really upsetting, because I'm like, they forget there's a beginning, and there's a big meaning behind all of this. And people are getting harmed because they're trying to make a buck off from it. And it's a shame. So first time saw that being following my friend, broad daylight. She and I are walking along, and I'm seeing something out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, what the heck? And my friends kind of just talking. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know what I'm seeing here. I don't know what I'm seeing. We reach our destination. We turn back around to go back to her home. And I was staying at her place on the very top floor. And by the time I got to her house, this thing had followed us all the way back in broad daylight. And I'm a cartoonist, and I go to my friend. I'm like, I grab a piece of paper. I said, look, I don't know what I just saw, but I just saw this thing following us back and forth to the location. And I'm thinking she's going to look at this thing and go, oh my gosh, Heidi, you're nuts. But instead she goes, oh, that thing. Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's been following me since I was a kid. And I'm like, what? And she's like, hey, Dad, look, he's back. Oh, dang it. Not that thing again. I'm like, it was just a nuisance that was known to the family. And I'm like, okay, everybody, that's weird. I had to grab something upstairs on second floor. It was still daylight out. Didn't have to turn the lights on. I go up there to grab what I needed, turned around to leave, and that dang thing was blocking my way out of the room. And I mean, every time I think about it, I get such chills. It was just hulking over me. Probably, I don't know, anywhere from 8, 10 feet tall, glowing red eyes, and just like it's strange to say, but I knew it wanted to kill me, and it was not happy that I saw it. And but I also knew somehow that if I swing at this thing, it's going to kill me. If I run from this thing, it's going to kill me. But I also knew if I stood there any longer, I was going to pass out and probably die. So I'm like, okay, okay. And somehow I just knew to close my eyes and start saying a prayer and slowly walk through it. And by the time I got to the top of the stairs, my legs were just jelly. I mean, I just collapsed pretty much down the stairs. And my friend hears me falling down the stairs. She comes to the bottom. She's like, what happened? And I could barely, I didn't even have air in my lungs. And I'm like, it's upstairs, you know? And she just looked and just kind of grabbed me out. I didn't understand then what I was dealing with. And soon after, like almost immediately, I started having nightmares. And they were nightmares of usually black shadow spiders. That's another term I gave them. Shadow spiders, like crawling on my ceiling and dropping down onto my bed and moving the sheets with every step. And I would bolt out of bed trying to get something to kill it. And sometimes I'd see like thousands of tiny little black ones just covering me. So it was weird to see it in my nightmare and open my eyes and wake up to seeing rows of eyes like a giant spider was there. So they would transform into reality as well, but they would slowly fade. And I was just like, I didn't see a connection between them. I did not. Luckily, I didn't ever have the situation of being frozen. And I would always react and get up and try to do something about it. And I just kept feeling if I just killed it once, maybe it'd stop coming back in these nightmares, you know. But, so it continued, the nightmares. And I was in one state and I moved back to my home state, and still keeping it with the nightmares, every so often with the shadow spiders. And I had seen UFOs at this stage. I'd seen like huge UFOs, even ones that responded to me and would come down and move a certain way for me, just to show they were there. It was a phenomenon I wasn't familiar with at that stage either. But so I joined a UFO group, and that UFO group were full of nothing but alien abductees. And I was the only one who had just seen massive UFOs that like took up the entire night sky and having craft move for me, you know. It just so bizarre. And so after I joined that group, I started having, I had a black helicopter, unmarked black helicopter hanging over my place, which are government people nosying, wondering who's part of these UFO groups, right? But then soon after that, I lived alone. And again, I was in college, and I woke up to the sound of somebody being in my apartment. And I was so freaked out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I live on the first floor. My dad was right. Young ladies shouldn't live on the first floor by themselves. And I had fancy bars on the windows. Like, how could they have gotten in? And all I knew is in the middle of the night, I heard loud rustling, somebody going through my stuff. My bedroom door is open. My phone's not near me. And I'm like, okay, I just need to bolt as fast as I can and hope whoever this is doesn't kill me, right? So I put my feet on the ground and I just start running out of this apartment as fast as I could, but stopped dead in my tracks because there were a couple of child-sized, I thought they were kids hanging in my living room. I'm like, well, hold on, I'm still kind of freaked out. It's like I thought I was about to die. Now I see there's children in my living room, and lo and behold, they were not. Of course, they were gray alien beings, and And I was talking really fast. I'm like, who are you? What are you doing here? You know, like, and they had my stuff in their hands. And I'm like, and they just kind of froze and looked at me with their big black eyes, and slit for a mouth, but their mouths were open, like, oh no, she's up, you know. And I took my stuff out of their hands. I'm like, put this down. Who are you? What are you doing here? And I'm getting to the part of the shadow people stuff. And I'm like, I go, to make a long story short, I go around the room. I see that there are several beings there, right? And ultimately, I was able to, in a sense, get rid of them. Okay. And up until this point, I've only had these nightmares of these shadow spiders all over the place. The next day, that head and shoulder shadow, the big 8-10 foot tall thing, was back, and it was in my place, and I was in a different state. I could not understand, like, hold on, I just got rid of these little weird gray looking alien things, and then I get this black thing back here with me. Like, it's not following my friend, now it's in my place. You know, what kind of sense is that? It made no sense to me. I didn't have alien abduction experiences. I never have. I think they got nosy and were trying, but you know, it took some time when I moved into another apartment, you know, and I'm like seeing these black shadowy masses, like, you know, step to the side, go around the corner, and I'm seeing it in my peripheral vision pretty strongly, and sometimes head on. I'm like, but I could feel the presence. It felt nosy and invasive. I couldn't make the connection. I just didn't understand. So flash forward a little bit. I moved to another apartment. I get a roommate, and she witnesses these things as well. And she was absolutely Pentecostal, super religious. You know, those are the folks that don't cut their hair ever. They wear the big skirts, you know, and whatnot. So super, super religious, and just felt like these are demons, you know, whatever. I'm like, okay, yeah, all right. You know, don't talk to me about this demonic stuff, UFOs, aliens, you know. But I thought, you know, she's a cartoonist. I was a cartoonist. It would be kind of fun to be roomies. But so as witnessing these things, right, and these things are going on, she's witnessing them, but she's not talking so much, but she's drawing them, and I'm drawing them. And then one day she goes driving to school, and she went to a different college than I did, and she calls me in a panic, talking about something alien jumping on the hood of her car. And I was like, what, you know, what is she playing a prank on me? You know, like, don't talk about this stuff. These are demons, you know, what? And then she's talking about, you know, it just made no sense. And I'm like, you know, later on in the day, we go to meet up to talk. Like, what happened today? What were you talking about? An alien jumped on the hood of your car. And as we're sitting there talking in the car, she's describing to me, like, well, I saw this, it was kind of like a sparkly, all crystal, like looking, almost like a gel like creature that was on the hood of her car, and it had a calming effect to it, and it started transmitting information to her, and it told her that it was there to introduce what's to come. And she's like, Heidi, it's freaked me out, but it calmed me so much, and it gave you such an exhilarating feeling. I wasn't like panicked. I was like exhilarated, you know. I was like, okay, whatever, you know. And I didn't know what to think of this. I never heard of such a creature before, and I'd of course looked into the UFO alien topic, right? So I'm sitting there, we're talking about this, when suddenly she closes her eyes, and she's Latina, and she's got quite a heavy accent, and she's like, I need to meditate. I'm like, meditate? Like, I didn't know it's something that she does. And she's like, yeah, and closes her eyes, and this voice comes from her with a reduced accent and says, hello, I've been waiting to speak to you for a very long time. And I'm like, what just happened here? I don't get it. You know, it's nighttime, sitting in my car, And my friend closes her eyes, and suddenly her voice has changed. I'm like, okay, she's pulling a big prank on me. Like, come on now. And I'm like, I said her name. I'm like, Samantha, you okay? It's like, oh, this is not Samantha. Okay. I'm like, well, and I'm like leaning up against the side of the door, like I'm about to jump out of the car. Like, what is going on here? And this voice comes back and said, I'm what you would call an alien being. And I was like, oh, I'd heard and seen this before, where people would be hypnotically regressed, right? And instead of them talking about what they're seeing in first person, like the alien being would speak through them. So I'd seen it before, but I couldn't believe that my super religious friend here is suddenly doing this right now. It was so unbelievable. And I'm trying to hold myself together and go, okay, alien, where are you? It's like, I'm up in a ship. Okay, can you show your ship? I'm just like, what? And it's like, I cannot, because your governments know how to shoot us down now. And I was like, okay. And then it piped back and said, but I think I can show an image of myself, project an image. And I did not expect that. And the car started to fill with a hum, and this pink, fleshy colored being appeared in the car between the both of us. And I was convinced really easily after that this was real. Okay. So that was the introduction to something that, again, we're college kids. We would have never, ever expected to have something like this happen. But without, it's just so many details, but this being made itself available at most any time for my friend to go and meditate, she called it. And this being would share things. But it was odd because, we're thinking, ooh, I've got the keys to the kingdom. Let me ask, lottery numbers. I'm like, what is he here for? I had no idea, and so I'm asking a bunch of silly questions, and it would block like all of the questions that would not benefit you to know, was all that kept saying. I'm like, where are you from? If I told you where, you wouldn't know where. It's like, okay, you got me there. So it's just a bunch of blocks. And it wasn't until I shared about an odd dream that I had that this being just started talking about the shadows. They call them shadows. I call them shadow people. And the information that I put out to the world about shadow people, Hat Man, all came from the interactions of a so-called alien being who spoke of there being a God. This God of our Bible is real, and how we need to prepare ourselves for the onslaught of these shadow people and this Hat Man thing. And I'm like, hold on, is this the battle of all battles? What are we talking about here? And he called it a secret war. And that is the title of my book, The Secret War. So it has always been something related to the alien topic. A lot of people are like, oh, did you know? Yeah, I've said that from the beginning. So important to hear the whole story, to know how this stuff came to be, because it wasn't from my, just diving in and, wow, I got this research. An alien being gave very accurate information about the presence of the shadow beings, what they would be doing, and how it would accelerate, and what to do in the next steps. And those next steps are here now. And soon I'll be talking further about what is going to be going on next. And in the meantime, it shocked me. Like you mentioned, an author I'd never heard of. It's like they're writing on my topics. Like you wouldn't expect, when you introduce something against all odds, and I'm a minority woman, going out there talking about this stuff and being poo-pooed and laughed at, that this is not a real thing. And then people did take the information and not put it out in the right tone, not put it out in the certain way that I was told to put it out there. And now people are trying to conjure Hat Man. A kid has died. It's disgusting. And it's one of the reasons why I took it upon myself to trademark both of these things. And people are like, well, how could you do that? I'm like, well, how could Spider-Man, be trademarked? It's like it had a beginning. And it's like in hopes of preventing people from causing any more harm. I don't know who the people are that are taking and putting out, hey, I'm the expert. I don't know who these people are. I don't know any TV show or any film company that has taken my story from me and put it out. They just run with things. And it's unfortunately, there's more to come. And unfortunately, I can't say, yay, that's okay that you're doing that over there, because I don't know these people. They don't reach out and introduce themselves. Hey, Heidi. Well, there have been some. You mind if I do this? It's like, no, please don't. And they go and do it anyhow. So it's cleaning up a lot of messes out there, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and I'm hoping that people understand it's nothing to conjure. It's nothing to get comfortable with. It's like, oh, my Hat Man is protective of me. I'm like, well, now you owe him. Do you understand? You don't want to owe, And sleep paralysis. That's such an angering topic and title for me, because that was not anything to be discussed ever until, my goodness, I was a regular on Coast to Coast. Well, I still am on Coast to Coast. And, so the topics got out there, right? So they had to have an answer for this. It's just kind of like the whole UFO debacle. Like, oh, we gotta debunk this. So, but sleep paralysis, that is the answer to the explosion of shadow people, Hat Man phenomena being spoken of around the world in the millions. So that was the scientific explanation, sleep paralysis, which doesn't fall into place with this at all. And it didn't until it hit such extraordinary numbers that they had to respond somehow and throw that garbage on it and say we're all hallucinating the same way, seeing a man in a hat and a suit, and, oh, these shadowy creatures are coming trying to take your soul. Really? Like, that's all of us having a grand party of a hallucination. So I'm sorry, it was a lot to explain all at once, but it's one of the reasons why I'm like, I'll give a little bit here and there, but sometimes I just got to explain the whole thing to see the origination of this does not come from me necessarily, as the person that I just did all this research. I have now, but in the beginning, I was a college kid that was put in front of beings along with my friend, and agreed to put this out there. And but also remembered, imagine that, remembering spontaneously, not under hypnosis, remembering agreeing to do this. And here I am sitting today with if those beings were wrong, it would have stopped and died at some point, but it didn't. And it gets even more interesting. I'll tell you the rest of some of that. I'll let you ask me what questions you might have.
Well, I'm glad that you got that out in one cohesive stream. I didn't want to interrupt because I thought that story was very important, but I couldn't help but have kind of just an epiphanous moment for myself when you were describing something. I'll give you a brief kind of, what's the expression, 1,000-foot overview or something like that, of how I got into this. When I was a kid, I was made, well, when I was a child, probably around 8 years old, I had a grandmother who would share with me her experiences, and she described Hat Man, but this was, early 90s, and so we had no internet for a frame of reference, no place to go with it. And honestly, I don't know why she was telling me these stories, because they were horrifying, But nevertheless, she did share with me several stories about her experiences with a man in a hat and a sort of detective's coat, a duster is how she described it. And so she would have these experiences from childhood all the way into her adult life. And one in particular that stuck with me was how she saw it the same night that her sister saw it, and they shared a room together. But then in the morning when they were discussing it at breakfast, the mother chimed in, she overheard, and expressed that she also saw it. So 3 individuals in the same house seeing the same entity, one of them being in a separate room. And so to me, I was never a thought of this is a psychological phenomenon. Although I was a child, I didn't have that ability to leap to that conclusion. But when I got older and I was introduced to the concept, obviously I had some reservations about the idea. But when I became 16, 17 years old, I found out that my other grandmother, who passed away when I was very young, she had these experiences of seeing a bright white light in her window. And when she would call out to her mother's name, the light would basically flee before anybody could enter the room. And she also had these experiences with shadow people in her bedroom. Now, I never heard it from her. I only heard it from my great aunt. And my aunt said there is a book that she said disturbed her so much that she told my mother, her daughter, never to read the book. So naturally, I go to my mother. She spills the beans rather quickly. I find out that it's Communion by Whitley Strieber. So I'm reading this book, and as Whitley is laying out in the book Communion for the audience, and Heidi, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it is an amalgamation of firsthand experiences, testimonies from abductee victims, alien abductee victims. And as I'm reading these experiences, they are mirroring my other grandmother's experiences in that the sleep paralysis, the presence of entities in the room with you. And I'm starting to realize that there's some sort of correlation, which to me felt very important. It felt like at 16 years old, there was something mysterious about my family, you know? And so show me a 16-year-old who you expose this breadcrumb trail to, who's not going to become sort of invigorated and is going to chase this down. And so I did. I very quickly found out that my father has experiences with the same entity. But one of the things that you said that was very interesting when you were describing your experiences was this shadow spider. And this is interesting to me because I'm jumping to conclusions here just based off of the nature of our conversation that these things are all connected. You said black helicopters. You said these shadow spiders, shadow people, this one with a sort of head that is just placed upon shoulders and red slit eyes. And of course, the Hat Man. And so am I right in thinking that there's a common thread between all these things from your perspective?
Everything except for the black helicopter. That's government.
Okay. And so the spider, my mother, who didn't have very many experiences like this, although she has expressed to me recently these small pitter-patter of feet through her house and the jiggling of doorknobs. And this is in waking life. She'll be in bed reading. Her husband will be brushing his teeth. They'll both hear the pitter-patter and the jiggling of the doorknob, and they'll look over to one another, and there's just nothing to be said about it. Excuse me. But she had these nightmares she would tell me about all the time about these shadow spiders. And I never plugged my mom into the equation in that way because I just assume she is afraid of spiders, although she does have spiders. Like she's a sort of the Dr. Dolittle of the family, and she has all sorts of reptiles and arachnids and snakes and things of that nature. So maybe that doesn't plug in just the fear of spiders, but she would tell me about debilitating night terrors of spiders. That was her big thing. And so I just did. How does that plug in the spiders thing?
Well, I mean, shadow people can shapeshift. So that's another form that they take. They take the form of rodents, cats, spiders. And, originally when I called the Hat Man shadow, I thought it was another form that they took, but I was wrong. And quickly, well, it wasn't really quick, but not too far after my introducing them, I distinguished Hat Man to be different than shadow people. So I don't call him Hat Man Shadow anymore. I call him just Hat Man. And it's with a space in between. People call him, they write him as like he's Batman, like he's a superhero. He's not. And we should never regard him as something good or a hero or anything like that. And I can't stress that enough, There's a big problem. There's a big problem. These things are here because we invited them here and we let them get comfortable and we got comfortable with them. And this is not ever a good thing. So yeah, the running in families, you see the pattern, the same thing with alien abductions. They are walking hand in hand. Now, this is something I talk about in the Secret War book. And people wonder, why is this continuing like this? Why is it the whole family? It's like going on and on and on. And, aliens follow genetics. They have a certain, we breed cows, a certain cow that tastes the best too, right? They breed, and they follow the lines, and they say that they hook people up to meet each other. So they have these relationships and have children, and they follow it. I mean, the aliens lie a lot. But they also do create instances for a reason, and not everybody that appears like a regular person is not. But the thing that people need to keep in mind is, there's all sorts of alien beings. There's reptilians, praying mantis, and they do similar things differently, abducting, raping, pillaging, abusing, lying, teaching, all of this stuff. You're like, but what's the common element? It's the shadow beings. Those aliens are essentially possessed by shadow beings. Okay. You will see people who have had alien contacts. They say contacts, but it's abduction and abuse. They have this type of things going on, but they also just so happen to have poltergeist activity and shadowy creatures and the Hat Man. It's all connected. They do similar things. They paralyze you. They take advantage of you. They give you nightmares. They have their way with you. It's just a lot of similar things. And, they say sins of the father, this is why, your son might have this problem. It's like, but how is that possible? Like, I didn't make this agreement. Why would anything he agreed to go on to me? But it's just like the evil eye. People can put a curse on you and it works. It's like, how is that possible? There are rules, but they're being broken. They are being broken. But no matter what the answer is, you could always be done with their crap. You don't have to deal with it. And that's probably the most important message I've always had. Yeah, you've had them for what, 40 years? Guess what? You can end it today if you want to. If you want to. People are like, no way. Oh, yeah, don't doubt. Yes, you can. And that's been, again, I would not have had the ability to come up with this on my own. It was coming from elsewhere. And as the world accepts that there are indeed aliens, there are from other places and living here, they do communicate. And it's not always just with the government. If people can just believe for a moment, like, that stuff Heidi put out, I don't know, all those years ago, it has been working. I guess she might have actually got this from where she said she did. So I don't have the answer 100% for why it's all in your family, why the shadow spiders, why a certain type. I hate spiders to the teeth of me. So I'm sure they knew that. And they're like, let's take that form. I mean, if I hated fingernails, it might have been a bunch of fingernails all over. I don't know. But
right.
but these are more common. Shadow spiders. They don't always look like spiders either. Kind of like a bunch of tentacles sometimes too. Just out of a cloud or something.
You know, I want to. You touched on something there, making it end, and I would very much like to talk about how to make it end. I think I have an idea of where you're going with that, but we'll save that for later on.
Sure.
And I do want to talk a bit about what your conclusions are when it comes to the nature of shadow people. What are they? Because a lot of people you see online, I personally see, the idea that they're ghosts, souls that never went to the other side, kind of these things that don't really have a lot of what's the word, sort of levity to them. They're not based on any information that we have. These are just people that haven't passed on. Oh, these are just, ghosts, or the echoes of an event. When an event sort of has a high energy, let's say if someone did die and you're talking about a haunting, well, the immense trauma and negative energy that took place in that is sort of on this repeating loop. But I get the sense that that is not your contention, and that you have another idea as to what shadow people are.
But see, that's the thing. It's not an idea. It's not a speculation. It's not a piece of the puzzle. It was the whole thing. I've put it out there, and it's not. Again, it's not for me sitting there with a pen and paper taking note of, well, you have this. I'm going to count how many got this and how many got that. This is what beings from elsewhere who saw the onslaught of these negative things taking advantage of people at their most vulnerable time, usually while you're sleeping or mourning the loss of someone, or you're sick, or you're addicted to drugs, or you're drunk. That's when these things are like, aha, I got you now. Well, that tells you that they don't always have the upper hand. You have to be brought down a few levels in order for them to get advantage of you. Now, if you're a being and you could see clearly all this black things attacking people constantly, you might have a heart and take a step forward and reach out to somebody like unsuspecting college kids and one who could write a book. So what, when I was first putting word out there on these topics, and thousands of people, I couldn't believe it. I didn't know others had experienced it. Thousands of emails in one night. Thousands. I just couldn't respond. It was too much. And people, I would hear from these paranormal investigators, it's like, oh, those are just the shadows of ghosts. I'm like, wait until you see them, because when you deal with them, you'll get back to me, because I was told you're going to start running into them more. Like, ghost hunters were not, and take note of this, ghost hunters then were not seeing them on a regular basis until time started changing. Okay, and this is part of what these more positive beings were telling and teaching myself and my friend were they're going to ramp up, and it's going to be out of exorbitant amount of sightings and dealings with these things. And and slowly but surely, the ghost hunters started getting in touch, like, oh my God, I don't know what I just dealt with. What was that? And I'm like, it's what I just said it is, call it demonic, call it whatever you want, but it's not from here, and it wasn't meant to be here, and it's taking advantage, and it is taking souls. Okay, that sounds so ridiculous for people who hardly regard they have a soul. And bringing people to understand this is what they're after should really wake people up. But instead, people are like, oh, that's hocus pocus. And I don't get into that religious stuff, but I just saw the devil. Hold it. That's a religious term. How'd you know it was the devil? Well, I could feel that evil coming. Oh, you could feel something with your soul. That's what you felt, because he was looking at it. He wants what you've got right there. And it's so tasty, and when people push and say, because that my church did something horrible to children, I'm not going to look at my faith anymore. They're just loving that up, because it leaves you vulnerable. Because if you don't have faith in something more positive, then throw a shoe at this thing when you see it next time, because nothing can help you, and nothing I tell you can help you.
My father, he has these experiences, and he's able to, I don't know when the last time it happened, but he's able to get out of the paralysis, and he's able to sort of get up and yell at it. And even in his waking life, as you mentioned before, it's still there, and then it sort of fades away. But he's up and out of the bed and yelling at this thing. And it's so interesting. I unrelated to what you're telling me now, have my own beliefs that this is all ramping up and that it's going to continue to ramp up. I had an experience. I'm not sure if I've told it on the show. I've had an experience when I bought my new home. I recently moved to Florida. I was walking the dog, and after seeing some neighbors argue, this was incredibly bizarre event. And I'll try to give it the abridged version, because I really want to get into what your thoughts are on these things. But I'm outside. I'm walking the dog. I can hear neighbors. They're screaming at each other. It's a husband and a wife, and they're being vile, and their voices are echoing through the streets. It's so loud. And unfortunately, as I get near their house, the puppy is disturbed by the screaming and decides to sit down right there. Oh. So now I'm sat across the street from these people, and I'm mortified because I'm like, they're going to know that I hear them. I don't want them to know that I'm hearing them arguing. And eventually I pick up on the husband's mad about the wife forgetting something out somewhere. So now they have to get in the car and go to this thing. So they get out of the house in a huff. They get in the car. They slam the door. They peel off, and they've left all their lights on and their garage door wide open. So as I'm standing there with the dog, a family approaches, and I'm anticipating having a nice moment with the family. I've got a puppy. They've got a stroller. They've got some other young kids. It's going to be a pleasant interaction. Mind you, it's dusk. It's getting dark. And as this family approaches me and we begin to have this predictable interaction, I can see in my peripheral that someone is now beelining for me out of this garage. And even though I just watched them leave, common sense tells me, well, I guess they didn't, or somebody didn't, because there's somebody right there and they're coming towards me. Now, I'm non-confrontational. I don't want, I'm mortified when people feel embarrassed. I can feel it too much. I don't like it. I always try to act like I didn't see the embarrassing thing. I'm never the type to lean in and go, haha, because I don't want to feel what you feel. So I'm beginning to turn away from this person because I'm mortified that they think that I heard their argument. Not only that, but they're beelining for me, which tells me clearly they're coming to like talk to me about what just happened, which is just I couldn't even deal with that. I don't want to talk. Hey, whatever's going on with you and your wife and you're arguing, that's on you. I didn't hear anything. So I begin to turn because I'm so non-confrontational that I don't even want to anticipate him approaching me. I want to like act like, oh, hey, didn't see you there, because from the beginning of the conversation, I want to establish that I have no idea what's going on. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see you. Ooh, whatever, And this person walks directly up to me, and my back is turned, but I know just based off of watching them, they're like right next to me, and I'm waiting for them to say something, and they're not saying anything, and so I'm now like begrudgingly, I'm like, okay, let's have this interaction. I turn around. There's nobody there. And I'm fine with that. I leave and I go home and I tell my wife, I go, yeah, this is really strange. This just happened to me. And she goes, that's really creepy. And I'm like, huh. Yeah, I didn't really think that was. And you know what was interesting? I never saw any details on that person. I could see the family. I could see the stroller. I can see the kids and the husband and the wife. I could see them all, even though it was getting dark. This was a shadow. I did notice that. It was completely, I couldn't make out anything except for definitively a man walking towards me. So I go, yeah, I guess that is creepy, huh? Heidi, I'm telling you, for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something was trying to get in my house. This is the impression that I got because I'm not new to this. Something was knocking. Something was asking my permission to get into my home. And
yeah,
it was knocking on windows. It was knocking on doors. It was knocking on the garage door. It was knocking on windows to the point, Heidi, where my cousin would be here with me. And this was such a constant occurrence that like we were trying to get quickly, you know? So one time it knocked on the door while the handle was in arm's reach. So as soon as it knocked on the door, my cousin and I looked at each other. We're having a conversation. We looked at each other, grabbed the handle, ripped it open, ran outside. I went one way, he went the other. We saw nothing except for a black cloud move across my front lawn. This is at nighttime. And it got to the point where I just started to insist that it had no authority, that I was the homeowner. I was invoking the power of the name of Christ, and telling it that it had no authority here. It had no business here. This is my home, and you know, to go where Christ wills it. Because I just, you know, it's funny, I'm hearing tapping on my window now. But I got to the point where I literally, I had to do that like several nights in a row before all the activity stopped. And I say that all just to say that it does feel like it's ramping up. This is what I do, right? I'm into the paranormal and the conspiratorial and the occult. And I see, you know, anecdotally stories all across the internet that just seem to be ramping up, that all seem to fit the bill of a genuine experience. You know, there's certain elements to these stories that are patterns. You can establish patterns from one person's experience to the next. And that kind of helps you to categorize these things and determine whether or not somebody's having a genuine experience. And I see more and more and more, especially in the past like 5 years, it's gone through the roof now. And I think that shows like mine are well received because people are having these experiences so rampantly these days.
Yeah. No, and you know, you having seen that thing run from the house tells me it's probably what created their argument. It inspires that kind of garbage. And
yes,
definitely. So it's not shocking to me that something like that was seen. So hopefully that family is at ease, but now it's followed you home. But I'm glad that you blessed your place. But there's a more, how can I say, very, very, very all over kind of protective blessing method that I tell people how to do to keep them out, because they're very persistent. What else do they have to do? They want to eat. They want, you know, they want to create the problems. They want to be there when the problems happen, whether they create it or not. And the ramping up, it is just as I was told. And I'm worried for people. I am, because people are more likely to, you know, take a step forward and swing at things versus say a prayer. Prayers are what you need at this point. And you know, it's important right now to acknowledge that soul that you have, and something that was taught to us, that God is real. And you know, I tell people this. It's like I step forward with that first book on the shadow people thing. And during that time in my life in college, I was not a partier or drinker, whatever. I'm a therapist now. I went to school, you know, the medical profession. And so I tried to be logical. I really did. And but I'd seen a lot of strange things at that time. A lot of different alien type beings. I saw a lot of craft. I had the things that would walk through a wall, and I literally, as I was writing my book on the Secret War, I put in there, if Jesus were around, I think I would have seen him by now. Like I was that cocky to say something like that. And during that 4-year time, it took me 2 months to write that book, 4 years to get it published finally after sending it all over the place. And as I was waiting, I was editing the book here and there, right? And I'd put something so skeptical in there, you know, like I would have seen Jesus by now if he was around, because at the time people were saying, oh, he's in a tree trunk. Oh, he's in a piece of bread. It was just crazy. And I was like, that That's ridiculous, you know? And I tell you right now, I would have never, ever expected to have had any kind of encounter with him. But I absolutely did. And I rewrote that part of my book where I was bashing him. I was such a skeptic that people say that they'd seen him. Um, I was not shy to say, you know, I try to be painfully honest about what it is that I have experienced. Because it's like if putting myself as an example helps anybody to realize these things are real, you know, go ahead. You know, I'm using my real name. A lot of people hide who they are in these fields. You think that's their name, but it's their middle name. It's their nickname their grandma gave them. It shocks me. I've known people in this field for a long time, and they're like, by the way, Heidi, my real name is what? You know, I'm using my real name. And, you know, so it is what it is, and you get what you get. And I'll tell you, I had more than one encounter with Jesus that changed everything for me. And if it wasn't real, I look at my medical records because he healed me of something that was incurable, you know. It's sometimes people have to throw their ego to the side and say, look, their rumors would have died at some point that he was real, right? We wouldn't have all set our clocks to him, right? 2023 in the year of our Lord. Why do we mark that? All of us of every faith. And why, when people bash a religion, it is generally Jesus is the butt of the jokes, because that is all that I know in the face of alien beings, dark entities like shadow people. They can't stand the name and they leave, you know, they leave. And there's always a way, I tell people. And it's like, but they don't want to get into that religious stuff, but they just saw the devil. That's what they call Hat Man, the devil. And I'm like, you know, it's time to just keep it real. There is a battle going on. People have assumed it would be chariots of the gods coming in the clouds, but it's in the privacy of our homes. We go to bed at night and we're fighting for our lives, and literally fighting for our lives. And then next day you got to pretend it's all okay and go to work, or you'll be laughed at because you say you experienced something out of the ordinary. It's like, look, it's time to have the giggles, and you know, and I have a good time with these topics. I crack jokes all the time in this field, and if anything, I've been criticized about is sounding too joyful, talking about something so dark, you know. And I'm like, well, you know, I have to deal with these things as I do any other topic in my life. Humanly flawed, that's what. And I crack jokes about everything in life because it just makes it easier. But the facts are what they are, and you know, Jesus is real. Aliens are real. These demonic things are real. Shadow people, Hat Man. And Hat Man, if you have him coming around, it's a whole new level of bad.
All right. So let's, and for the audience sake, some of them haven't heard the story. I'm not going to tell the whole story because I have told it several times, but I had an experience where I had 4 nights of this entity visiting me, and I eventually saw it, and it was sort of this rage incarnate creature. I saw it in my dream. That is, until I woke up in the morning, and my wife described a dream where she saw it as well, sitting on my chest, pinning me into the bed. And then eventually my son woke up crying from a nightmare and described a very similar monster, how he put it. And so I became very desperate, and I called out to the name of Jesus Christ, and it made it all stop. It was this 4-night fiasco, and very much to the token of what you said earlier on in the show, these things come in when you're at your lowest. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was angry. I was going through a rough period in my life where I had also just moved back to my home state from trying to carve out a life in Las Vegas. And I guess I just had these feelings of, you know, being a failure and things of that nature. And so, although I didn't have a good barometer for my own emotional state, that didn't mean that I wasn't in a bad headspace. And so, yeah, I think these things feed off of that. And it was only the name of Christ that was able to stop this experience in its tracks and, made sure that it didn't go any further. But I wouldn't have been able to, I don't know what I would have done if my son was subjected to it anymore. So that being said, I believe wholeheartedly that is the key. And it's not just my own experience. I'm sure that you've seen this very same thing. Calling on Christ will stop alien abductions. It'll stop,
yes,
Bigfoot encounters. It'll stop shadow people and demons and all these different things. And I can certainly testify to that. So I would like to, because we're at the hour mark, really get into these two subjects in this order. One, what are shadow people? And then after we unpack that, what or who is the Hat Man? So Heidi, can you hold our hand through this and tell us, what are these shadow people? What do they want? How are they related to this phenomenon? The floor is yours.
From the get-go, I learned that these things are, of course, shapeshifters and are darkness themselves. The absence of light is a common phrase that witnesses will describe, and the different forms that they can take are immense. And the head and shoulder shadow ones, and for people that want to see what these look like, if they go to my main website, they could look at the shadow people page and see the different shapes and sizes that they come in. At shadowfolks.com or HeidiHollis.com, it goes to the same place. And so the head and shoulder shadow one that doesn't have legs, it was never a person. That's another thing people should know. These are not ghosts. And you'll know it the moment you are confronted by one of the red glowing-eyed ones especially. And also the round red glowing-eyed ones with a hood, those are not shadow people. And this is part of the misinformation that people put out there that try to take this information of mine and make it their own, like, oh, I got this, so that's a shadow being. No, they don't wear clothes. Shadow beings do not wear clothes. There are ghosts that if you see, like, it has clothing, on it, and sometimes they're just kind of in the shadows a bit. There are ghosts that are dark, but not absence of light. Okay, not, oh my God, my soul is shaking, I'm looking at this thing. It's a different kind of fear. Again, I was raised in a haunted house. That's a spooky chills, okay, kind of feeling. These things, it wants to kill you. It is deep, dark, and heavy. So those are the minions of Hat Man. They work for him, not with him. They're not his equal. He directs them. And there's a Grim Reaper looking like thing that also works with him. There's the old hag, and the younger looking hag also works for, and I wouldn't say with him either, but for Hat Man. And it's a shape-shifting, growling, whispering type of creature. They don't generally talk, the shadow people, but a lot of times people are like, they spot it, and it doesn't like being spotted, and it will charge straight at you or wisp away fast. It's usually one or the other. They don't usually linger or slightly fade away. They start to fade. I've seen them as black spheres as well, and that was a crazy thing. That was so absolutely clear that it was alien connected with the black spheres, because they almost acted kind of mechanical. But the shadow beings, this is not their home. They have come from elsewhere. And this is just kind of what they do. It's like, why did Christopher Columbus come? Well, because he wanted the land. Okay. He wanted the control. He wanted the power. these things also do the same.
And so are we saying that these beings, and they span, seems quite a few categories, they come from a different realm potentially, or is this sort of in the way that it couples with alien activity, an exterior planet that they come from? Where is it that you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, interdimensionally speaking, aliens can do the same. They can step through the veil, I guess you could say. So you could call them interdimensionals as well as off-planet, because they are alien. They are not from here. They come from a dark source, and separate from what we come from, a light source. God. These things have another method of being, and absolutely infiltrated our space and taken over. But it's something that they've always done. This is what they do, and call it demonic. Look at the Bible and look at. I'm talking about something that could change shape and fool you. These things can do so much to appear as one thing, and you just can't quite get a grasp on what it is you're experiencing always. And oh man, it's so sad, and it really gets my blood boiling with some of the stories that I get. But I had a UFO group for over 15 years called UFO2U.com, the number 2, the letter U.com. And I met at a local library. I'd have like 50 people show up every month, and people would write me about their alien and UFO encounter stuff, right? And when I had the contact that I did with that more positive alien being with my friend and I, it told me, don't record, don't write down anything. Do not put this on your website. I had a website up before most people knew what the internet was. And my UFO website had so many cool graphics back then. I mean, it was like always in the top 100 in the world. Imagine that. So I had a lot of emails of people talking about alien stuff. But when I was only allowed to talk, excuse me, and name the shadow people phenomenon for what it was. It was only safe for me to do after it was in hard print. And it was so hard for me, like, to hold that in. Oh my goodness. It was so hard to not speak publicly on it. But I did get on Jeff Rince's show called Sightings. And my whole interview was transcribed by David Icke. Imagine that. But I couldn't name what these beings were. But I spoke of what they were capable of doing and what they're going to be doing, right? So I'm like, it was so hard. But the moment I was allowed to put the first images of shadow people on my website, all of my email, all of my content, everything of what people were writing me about, it 100% became shadow people. And then when I got that image of Hat Man put on my website, 95% is Hat Man now. So this is the evolution. This is the evolving that I mentioned of the phenomena, to go from being the alien lady to shadow people to Hat Man. And now the next thing that's about to happen is just everybody needs to find their faith, is all I could tell you.
This is very much, in my mind, bringing to the forefront this concept of as the days of Noah, right? And so in the end of days, in the book of Revelations, I believe, it talks about how the end times things are going to be like the days of Noah. And I can't help but wonder, these things, these darker than dark shadow entities, right? This absence of light.
Yeah.
If these could be spirits in some way, but not in the sense of the spirit of a person who's passed on, but the spirits of, these Nephilim that died in the flood, or the ones who did die in the floods, where do their spirits go? I've heard people on the show talk about, the spirits of the Nephilim, the disembodied of the sons of the fallen and the daughters of man, that they almost still run things in a way like Al Capone from prison, right? So it's like he, even though was locked up, he was still running the mob from prison, and that these things, they aren't here all the time, but they do have influence over this realm, and they can exist in a sort of, I believe the expression is a corporeal form, something that they require a certain amount of energy that they get in the form of like negativity, like we were saying before, that these dark, I believe they feed off of that, that type of energy, that type of negativity. And that once they get enough of it, they can manifest into this realm in some sort of limited form. Although to us it's terrifying, it's still only a fraction of what they really are. And this idea that we're reaching a point in this story where these things are going to be, and maybe it's because the world is so upside down, that there's plenty of that type of energy for them to feed off of. But either way, that we may be approaching this as in the days of Noah kind of event, and that they that could be why we're seeing them more and more prevalently. Does that make any sense to you?
I hear what you're saying. A lot of people think we're in the end times, and this is something that I say it's a time of change. And it's like nobody knows the day or the hour when such a thing would happen. But I would pose to you, this can't be a coincidence that my family, using our names and likeness, was portrayed in an apocalyptic television series that absolutely later I lived. I just can't believe it. It's just every time I think about it, but it's the television show called Millennium, the third and final season. And uses my family's name, has me on there with a different first name, but my dad's full name and my sister's nickname. All I can tell you, and to say it's an apocalyptic program says it all. And here I am talking about and owning the modern devil's name in the world, which is what Hat Man introduces himself as, the devil. And it's the name that people get in his presence oftentimes. It's more evil than evil. It's something that they couldn't even imagine was to exist. And, I've interviewed people on my show, my various shows over the years, now on Coast to Coast AM's podcast network. And I find it interesting when I get the people who do near-death experience investigations and such, and everything's all love and light and fluffy. I'm like, okay, yeah. What about the dark ones? What do they see? And I'll never forget this one author says, well, that's interesting because they all see this man in a black suit and hat. I said, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I figured. So it's him showing up for people at the end of their tunnel, grabbing them, taking them to the other side. He is taking souls. And it just is what it is. We all have to die at some point. And people hope whatever's past the veil, it's pretty cool. But imagine if something is cheating on this planet to gain access to you, it definitely will do it on the other side. And I like to give the example always of it cheats to gain access. And so your situation in particular is interesting because I always give the example of, say you're having a dream that somebody's knocking at your door and you look out your door and it's your sister. But something tells you it's just not right. But you open the door anyway. You go against your gut instinct. But it's just a dream, right? You opened the door. you let it in, and it comes into your real life. That's how these things so easily can cheat to gain access to you. People are like, I wouldn't welcome this thing. No, but you might have had a dream where you went against your better judgment. Something so simple. They are getting access that way, even. So you can't always put your finger on why. It's just show them the door, sprinkle some Jesus on it, as I always say, and be done with it. No need to look into the riddle of the Sphinx with it. Just get it out of the way, because it will destroy you and collect you when it's your time. Or the worst case scenarios, I can't even tell you how many people have told me he had them attempt suicide and don't remember doing it. So he possesses and aims to kill you, to collect you.
I have had that sort of knocking thing quite a bit, actually. And it's gotten to the point now where when it happens to me, so essentially what will happen is I kind of chalked it up initially to this idea of exploding head syndrome, which is sort of, I guess it's a medical term. It sounds ridiculous, the name of it. But it's this phenomenon where you start to drift off to sleep, and then suddenly you're woken by either somebody shouting your name, or it's just a loud noise that never actually happened in the waking world. And so that event that I told you about, where it was a 4-night escapade and it ended with me invoking the name of Christ.
Yeah.
It started with something repeatedly knocking on the door at night. And every time I would get up and go to check, there was nobody there. And so I started to have my suspicions that it was like me that it was knocking on, which is unsettling. Yes. And then, of course, the knocking on the doors around the house, which happened, everybody was awake for that and was able to see, or rather hear that.
Yeah.
And then I was in New Orleans recently with my wife, which is just a terribly haunted and dark place. New Orleans is a mess.
Yeah.
And I was in a hotel room where I was having this experience again. I would start to drift off, and two things were happening. One, as soon as I would drift off, I would immediately wake back up and just feel sort of anxiety and unable to go back to sleep. It would take a while, and I'd finally drift off again. And I heard suddenly 3 knocks on a window, like dung, 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 the way a window kind of vibrates.
Yeah.
And I woke up and I was like, oh, great, here we are. Because, by now it's just old news. And so I ignored it. And then it happened again. And I went to ignore it, except this time my wife was like, did you hear that? And I was like, oh, that was the actual door. And so I get up to go investigate. And I'm not going to open the door, though, because I'm not, I'm pretty keen to this situation already.
Right.
And I look through the people. No one's there whatsoever. I turn and look at the oven, and it is just the stroke of midnight. And so I said, okay, I'm going to turn the lights on. We're going to watch TV now, because I'm not going back to sleep. And luckily my wife is understanding enough that, because I think the worst thing is when these things happen and then like nobody wants to talk about it, because if you talk about it, then you give it like energy and attention. And then, right. So maybe if everybody just pretends it's not happening, and I just can't stand that feeling. It feels terrible. Yeah. So it was nice to just be like, all right, we're going to turn the TV on and the lights on, and we're just going to hang out. And so we hung out for like 20, 30 minutes, and we talked pretty extensively about how, like, yeah, look, something's going on. We're in New Orleans. This is probably a really old building. And that was not a person at the door. And I explained to her the dream that I had where somebody was knocking on a window. And but yeah, these things, they just sort of happen. And I've talked to people where, that's like this request for permission. They can't do anything without your permission, essentially. Yeah. But I would like to get into, how is it that you came to the conclusion that this thing is the devil?
It said it was.
Oh.
And, in the beginning, again, I'm introducing these topics to the world, and I'm getting thousands of emails, and the patterns were clear. More often than not, people would ask me, who is he? He's the devil, isn't he? They would answer their own question time and time and time again. And, he can make himself not be seen, right? He could stay in the shadows. Yes, he could blend in with the shadows, but he could step out from the shadows and be very, very solid, very real, and grin, the worst grin you'd ever seen in your life. Now, he is stepping out because he wants you to see and give him the fear he's looking for and see who's bringing this to you. He wants you to know he's here. He wants the world to know he's here. He's not shy. He talks as well. He'd be very chatty to people. And it's disgusting to me how he approaches children a lot. And anything you can imagine to break you, he will do. And you could just try to imagine. And it's absolutely gross. It's disgusting. It's demeaning. He has physically beat people down, thrown them across where neighbors see them flying through the air, being thrown into garbage cans, you know. He can be very boisterous, very bossy, looking in people's windows, abusing people in all kinds of ways. And when you can't take it anymore, when you wish that you were dead, that's when he really gives you a big smile and punches his fist through your chest and tries to pull your soul out. Those are horrific emails to get. So when people tell me, well, I'm not afraid of him. In fact, he did me a favor. He hit my abusive dad. Oh, great. Now you owe him, you know? And it's like he watches, he observes. He could be around there for 20, 30 years until he finds your weakness or your weakest point, or you're crossing over if you're dying, and he tries to get what makes you tick and take it from you. You know, it's a horrific battle that we're in the middle of. And it's like, I wouldn't make this up for anything. But people are like, well, you're talking about this, so that's why people are seeing it so much. I'm like, it's quite the opposite. Almost every week I get an email that says I thought I was the only one. So it's harsh, and it's hard to see what's happening. And then they have a viral competition to conjure up Hat Man. So people are overdosing, and a kid dies from that. And that's thanks to a lot of people who say, oh, I'm the Hat Man expert. Oh, I'm the shadow people expert. And they're getting movie deals and television deals. You know, I'm not popular for that, I guess. They don't come and ask me, you know, and it's weird. And it's like, I'm not the face that you would expect to have introduced such a horrific topic, but a guy, sure. You know, it's not that I'm a minority necessarily, but I'm a woman, and my name doesn't quite evoke horrific things, you know, but this is the truth of the matter that, you know, I've been trying to warn people for a long time, and I was told it was going to get to this level and told what he is. And, you know, when I had one thing that I didn't get to express so much, it's like, you know, I have 8 books published. Only 3 of them are on these dark topics. The rest are on Jesus, angels, faith, because I'm trying to get that whole perspective so people can understand the battleground, the players, and what you need in the midst of this. I put out my Jesus book. It's called Jesus is No Joke, because I couldn't fathom that he was so real and so present. I mean, absolutely could not. And that's after I saw him the first time. All I kept telling people is like, wow, Jesus is no joke. He's real, everybody. And so that's why I titled it that. But I think it's important to know that a skeptic as myself, if I could come full circle, and he told me with the first encounter I had with him was to finish that book. Though it was done, I was just editing it, the Secret War book that warned about the shadow people Hat Man phenomenon. That is what he asked me to do, or told me to do. And I just, you know, it's so important. And because of that encounter I had with him, no matter all the other stuff I'd witnessed and seen, nothing else mattered so much as him showing up and telling me to put that book out and not to worry what other people say. Know that I will be there to give you the words. Like that's what he told me. He wasn't very chatty. I don't know how people write a book on all the stuff he told people. I don't know. I've seen him several times now, but he's still not very chatty. And it's like, I'm just like, but it's important to know that there's something to be said about this man, a son of God named Jesus, that everybody targets. Everybody has the same recognition of what year it is since the year of our Lord. So there's something really powerful about that. Why is he always the target of so many things if he wasn't so real? I even heard of the government doing remote viewing on the death of Christ to see if he actually rose 3 days later. And he did, according to our government research. Isn't that something? So it's like, what are we saying here? Why does the name of Jesus work against so-called aliens and shadow people, hat man stuff? I mean, and people are afraid to say they're Christian anymore. It's like, be proud. Don't hesitate, because we're up against a really dark entity and a big force of them. And they're not backing down anytime soon. But I tell you, we have the tools if we trust ourselves. But the human potential is something to be reckoned with. Otherwise, these things would come to us as we are, wide awake, driving our cars, and try to take us on then. No, they wait till we're weakened and then say, gotcha now, I'm the boogeyman. Oh, come on. I just, you got to have no doubts in who you are and that God has your back. I mean, even thinking the name Jesus, if you are paralyzed, even thinking his name breaks that. So it's important.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of the time, these experiences, just because it would be a little intense for me to walk around my house saying, in the name of Christ, leave my home, out loud. I think I'd probably freak out my niece or something like that. So a lot of this is done in my head, but like with real thought clarity, and it works every single time. I think that I would like to end the episode if you could share with us at least one of your stories of your encounters with Jesus. But before we get there, could we say what is it that you suspect is going to happen? What is it that you've been told is going to happen in regards to the ever increasing sightings of these things, the sort of ramping up that we were expressing before, the title of your book being The Secret War? What is it that you see coming down the pipe?
I wish I had all the answers, but there's an element that I haven't addressed yet because it's more recent that I've come across it myself, and I hope soon to dispel all of that and put it out there. But what's happening are the weakening of people's beliefs, having them disregard that they have souls, having them put their energy and thoughts into their computers, their cell phones. So they're distracted. They're not creatively building, creating, doing. The people that are creatives, who are free thinkers, are number one targets of shadow people, hat man. People think, well, what did I do? It's like, why do I have such an onslaught? And I'm like, wow, if they put so much energy into one person, I'm like, well, who is this person that is ticking them off that they have to put so much effort into them? Like, take it as a compliment, but also prepare and get these things out of your space, because they're trying to stop the evolution of mankind, because we are evolving, and our creativity is one way that we evolve and are being able to develop, not AI. That is a terrible, it will stunt our growth, because we don't have to learn anything. We'll just pour it into the computer. But if we keep pushing and working our creative muscles, people who are gifted, who have a lot of deja vus or maybe insight to things, like even psychically so, those are targets. And so when they look into your soul and they see you're evolving, that's the light they're trying to stomp out. So there's a lot that's going on in it. It's a lot of dynamics, and you know, I'll tell you, it makes me stutter about what's going on and what is going to be transpiring, apparently. So there's a lot, and I just hope that people wake up and just quit with oh gosh, I want to stay looking cool. I don't want to talk about having experienced something. Just get over it already. It's like, I think for the most part, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody will laugh. I've been laughed at for the sillier things. I don't care. So I could care less what people think. And I think that's, being painfully honest and just learning to also laugh with your friends. It's a nervous laugh most of the time because they don't get it. And they're hoping to God you're not right, that you experience what you said you experienced, because then they have to deal with it, So, but yeah, there's a secret war going on. Our government knows about it. If I was wrong, they sure wouldn't have abducted me and interrogated me. I was a college kid, and I've been interrogated by our government more than once. What does that tell you? They don't have all the answers either. They want them, but it is what it is. Only God has all the answers. But I want people to keep the faith out there. I don't know if I answered all your questions, but you wanted me to talk about a Jesus encounter.
Yeah, that we can move on to that, because I think that as we're getting towards the tail end of the show here, if given the opportunity, I'd like to end the show on sort of solutions and positivity rather than just doom and gloom.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people, put your ethereal foot in their backside, because these dark things don't like laughter, joy, humor, none of that. Love, a light being on in your home. They don't like it. They can definitely still come into the light, but they most of the time don't, because they have the upper hand when they know that you can't see them so clear. So keep a light on. That helps protect you even. But there's a method of blessing your home. And I have it in my books. I have it on my Facebook group. If you email me through my website, I'll send it to you. It's methodical. It's thorough, just to make sure. And let me tell you, you can't have somebody come into your home and bless it and think that'll work either. You have to join in the blessing. It's your faith. It's your home. You have to stand behind that. You can't stand behind someone else with that, because it's personal. It's after you, not the person blessing your home. So, so there's always hope. I could not be sitting here talking about these things if I didn't have the experience I did with Jesus showing up. It only took for him to show up, for me to get the message. The skeptic that I was doing a good job writing what I did in that book, but here I am slamming Jesus in it, and I guess he saw I was a decent person making a huge mistake. And so he had to come and personally wake me up. I'm like, whoa, okay. So glad you're real. So it's just take the warning, take it to heart. Don't listen to all of the folks that have popped up saying, oh yes, oh my gosh, there's such a movement to say all the hat man and shadow people aren't bad. Don't feel threatened by them. Please. It's like, it's doing so much harm. And people are like, well, why would that bother you that somebody else is putting a different message? I'm like, you don't know the harm. That's terrible. That's terrible. And to have children write me, the 7-year-olds grabbing your cell phone are not playing video games always. They're writing somebody like me saying, Mommy thinks I'm crazy. Please help. So I actually wrote a book for kids that with because I'm a cartoonist as well as a therapist, and to show the method of blessing your home or your room. If you are living in a room, then your home, and it's like you can protect yourself. So as far as the first experience that I had with Jesus, I mean, changed everything. Changed everything. Here I'm known as the shadow people, hat man, alien, UFO lady, but my most highest rated book is my Jesus book. Because I just laid it all out there. I'm like, look, I didn't get into this stuff. I didn't believe any of this, but he definitely showed up. So when I'd come home from school, I come home from work, and it was in the middle of the day, and I would like take a nap and then go to my class or something. I worked at 5 a.m. to noon, and I'm like, tell my roommate turned down her TV so I could take a nap, and I was going to go to class, and I went to lay on my bed. And you move your pillow, you pull your blankets up or something. I absolutely put my head onto the pillow and fell onto the floor. And it fell so hard, I couldn't believe it. I was like, man, how'd I miss the bed? And I got up, and I'm like, whew, holy crap. And then I saw I wasn't in my room anymore. And I was like, okay, I don't know what just happened here, and I'm looking around. And I mean, it says every time I talk about this, I have chills from head to toe. And I'm like, what the heck? And I'm in front of my parents' home somehow. And I'm like, how did I get here? I was planning to go there, but I sure didn't get there. I'm like, maybe, I'm just trying to make the best out of the sense of what I'm sitting there in front of their home for. And then I see this man walking up their driveway, and it's a long driveway. And I'm like, oh, there's the family friend I planned to meet at my parents' home. So his name is Quincy. And I'm like, oh, that's him. That's him. I'm like, and I'm just thinking, I must have hit my head. I don't understand how I got here. And I tell you, he took only a few steps up that driveway, and the recognition of who he is and was just smacked me so hard. Every cell in my body, it screamed his name. Every cell. And me being my silly self, I palmed my face. I'm like, I can't believe this is going on. What on earth is going on? He gets right in front of me, and he says hello, as if he's going to talk about the weather or something. And I'm like palming my face still, and I'm like, well, hello, And he said, do you know who I am? If you knew who I was, you would not hesitate to say it. And I pulled my hands from my face, and I was stuttering. And I said, well, you're Jesus. Now, I don't speak any Spanish. I don't know why I called him Jesus. And he said, yes, I am. And I tell you, he had off-white robes on and shoulder-length hair. And I know I was looking where his face should be, but it was absolutely shadowed. And he started telling me about his life and how so much needed to be done. And as he's speaking, I'm like getting images and thoughts and feels and stuff. But I'm still myself going, oh my God, in my head, like this is really going on. I'm hitting my leg. I'm like pinching myself. And like, you are really here, Heidi. You are here. You are not hallucinating. And then I realized next to me is the cement porch I'm standing on. And I'm like touching it. I'm like, hold it. I'm touching the ground. I'm on my knees. I don't even remember going on my knees. And I'm thinking all this in my head because I'm just blown away. And then he got quiet. And then I felt like he realized I wasn't paying attention fully because I was freaked out in a beautiful way, but just, shock. And I look up at him, and I'm stuttering. And I said, whoa, what do you want me to do? And he started telling me, you need to finish writing your book. Do not worry what other people say. Know that I'll be there to give you the words. And I'm like, oh, okay, okay, and he started telling me something else, and I could see his lips moving. It's so strange. I could see his lips moving, but I knew this part I wasn't supposed to hear it until the time was right. And then I knew he had to leave. And I'm thinking, think of something real quick. I'd ask him something, ask him something. I'm like, what's my real name? And he laughed and said, I love you very much, Ilea. And I'm like, and I tell you, as he started to fade away and I started coming back into my body, I realized did not hit the floor. I was in that bed. I don't think I was, oh, I got chills so strong right now. I don't think I was there for that long laying there. But that love that came off from him was immense, beyond anything you could ever imagine or describe. And I didn't want to move. I came back to my body. I didn't want to move because that love was so just enormous. And that was the end of the first time that I saw him. But it changed everything for me, especially that part where he told me, don't worry what others say. Know that I'll be there to give you the words. Because I gave up grades in college to not have to do a talk, a presentation, because I hated speaking in front of people. So I knew I just had to have straight A's because I would get a 0 for a presentation from my college classes. I didn't care. So here I am, when I put this book out, only thing that got me up on these stages to talk, because I was painfully shy, was me looking to the heavens and saying, you promised you would give me the words. Now I'm holding you to it because I have nothing to say. And I say it before every radio show and everything because I get so nervous and in my head. And so I just literally let him take the wheel on it because I have nothing to say. It's not for me.
Doing this show and also listening to shows and doing research in my show, in the Ravens Watch, we'll talk about anything that falls into the 3 categories of paranormal, conspiratorial, or the occult. And people who talk to me about conspiracy theories, they'll kind of fall either way. Either they'll have a relationship with Christ, or they just don't, they haven't gotten to that point yet. They can get, it's really a 50-50 split. People who are sort of experts in their occultic pursuit, whether it's some sort of hermetic law, esotericism, alchemy, whatever it is, usually there's little mention of Jesus. And then people who are on the paranormal side, who have typically experienced something, and like we talked about at the top of the show, that will drive you to research and dig at what is this phenomenon? Why is it happening? Of course, you start to find this connective thread between all these other people that are having these experiences. And those people always have an outspoken relationship with Christ. And I say, even about myself and sort of that whole demonic entity that I saw, my wife saw, my son saw, that was a blessing, because I no longer have the luxury of sitting on the fence. I was shown a thing, and sure, it was horrifying, but that informed a lot of, because once you see that or you have an experience, you have to, well, I guess you don't have to. I do know of people personally who have even seen the Hat Man, don't believe in God. And I go, this thing that you saw, you believe that exists, but you don't believe that God exists? I don't understand, because, in their mind, they're like, oh, God is that's too cliche or right, outlandish. And it's like, you just saw the silhouette of a man in a duster coat in the corner of your bedroom, But I just think that's a funny observation, because typically if you've seen it, then you have a relationship with Christ. And if you're looking at only the dark side, which to me is the occultic side, right? Because those are the dark arts, and I'm very interested in learning about them, really, so that I can show my audience that it's real, that those practices are real. And that should inform your decisions going forward, because if those things are real, then what else is real? That's always my thing, is if this is real, then what else is real? And so, yeah, when you come through the paranormal side of things, you typically do have a relationship with Christ. And if you come through the conspiratorial or the occultic side, then not. And it's funny because is it just the experience? Is it that moment where your reality is shattered in such a way that you have to ditch the old paradigm and you struggle to look at this new paradigm through a lens that makes sense? And in my opinion, if you are one of those people who has stumbled onto this new paradigm and can't figure out how to make sense of it, the biblical context works really well. You might find that plugging in the biblical context and plugging Jesus Christ into your worldview will suddenly make things make a lot more sense. In fact, for me, personally, it's the only thing that makes sense. And I was not raised religious whatsoever, but at a very young age, I did start to notice the occult side of things. And slowly, this body of work started to become apparent to me. And it was only, I would say, 3 years ago that I definitively was like, okay, yeah, Jesus Christ, 100% all the way. Whereas before I was on the fence, and it was only, no matter how much, since 16 years old all the way to 30, no matter how much I had learned, I was never fully ready to say, yeah, I believe that Jesus Christ is real, until something happened to me and it was him that stepped in the way to save me. And so I think people only have the luxury of not believing until they're in a situation where they need help. And then all of a sudden that luxury is removed and you have to come to terms with who just helped you.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, honestly. And I've run into that many times too, where people will give that biblical title devil and not give the acknowledgement that something positive, like a polar opposite, God, Christ, exists. I'm like, but you are a believer of the evil existing. That you think that would be the epitome, the thing that pushed them over the edge to realize God is real too. But nope, there's a lot that are just stuck right there.
Yeah, I always say that there are these people that kind of LARP, right? They wear their pentagrams or, what have you. They decorate their home. Some people live in a perpetual state of Halloween. If you go to their house, there's nothing but Halloween decorations. And those type of people fall into two categories. One, the people that wear the swag, walk the walk, talk the talk, cover their house in the decor of things of that nature, but don't believe it at all. Very strange to me. That's wasted energy at the bare minimum. I don't know why you would go to that length to wear those things and decorate this way if you don't believe in it. Or even worse, people that do believe it's real, but somehow haven't made the leap yet to go to where you just described as the flip side of the coin, the polar opposite of this thing. If all of this darkness exists and you're wearing the jersey of a team, well, there's an opposing team. Yeah. And you seem not to have connected those dots, but you seem to in the physical realm gone out of your way to collect all the swag of that team. It's bizarre. It's amazing because those people in particular, they're right there on the edge. Yeah. They're living in this darkness. They're decorating with it. Their shirts are covered in it, and they're walking in this shadow right next to where all this potential light is, but they're not looking at that at all. And that to me is just bizarre. It's
sad. And some of the people are quick to defend shadow people and Hat Man. Like, you can't say they're all bad. They're going to get a box or something on the voter polls or something. I'm like, it's like, I'm not discriminating. These things suck. They are horrific. I know that this is their nature, and you've been fooled. I'm sorry, and I really am one that tries not to knock people for what they believe to be true for themselves. But when it comes to evil, I have no mercy for that. But this happens, though, too, for people who are abducted by aliens. I was in the groups where people slept with guns under their pillows and wanting to shoot the thing that raped their child, and then they started changing, calling themselves contactees. And they're not so bad. They taught me a language after they raped me, made me have these babies, it's so odd. It's like Stockholm syndrome, and hopefully people will start to realize the word abducted doesn't mean good. That's not good. It's never okay. Did they call and make an appointment? No. So it's not a contact. They abducted you, and our government is aware. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken people like myself and interrogated us to find answers about these beings, and it's a crazy scenario. But one thing I want to tell your audience too, if they have questions about their experiences, they can contact me. Most of my social media is at one Heidi Hollis, just putting a 1 in front of my name, and of course HeidiHollis.com. And I'll be sharing more about things that I plan to talk about in regards to Shadow People, Hat Man, and what's coming on my YouTube channel, which is just my name again. So yeah, it's getting intense, and I worry for a lot of people dealing with these things.
Well, before we go, I'd just like to share one quick story. One of my early episodes of the show, I had a guy on who was a abductee victim, and he went through regressive hypnosis, and he remembered a tremendous amount, including some sort of past life recollection. But he remembered a large body of abductions, several of them over his entire childhood, and that there was all sorts of medical procedures, and he had this idea that they weren't bad. He wasn't really too set in that, but he was kind of like on the edge of he certainly wasn't ready to go screw them, this was wrong, they are wrong, there's something really terrible going on here. He was much more leaning towards them being benevolent and maybe even kind. And when I asked him why, he started to recall a time where he was experiencing a lot of pain and fear, and that he suddenly was in a telepathic communication with one of these insectoids, and that it was telling him that there was nothing to be afraid of, and asking him why he was screaming. He was screaming, but sound wasn't coming out, or at least that's how he felt. But this thing did address it. And he basically expressed to it that he was terrified and that it hurt and he didn't want it to hurt anymore. And so it did something that took the pain away and relaxed him. And he said suddenly he felt calm and peaceful and even kind of happy. And then that was why this experience was not a terrible one. And I said, if you were a veterinarian and you were working on a dog, let's say, and this dog was thrashing around and lashing out, it would be conducive to your job to subdue that dog somehow. And so if you pump that dog full of some sort of numbing agent or a sedative, that dog would suddenly feel a rush of, calm and peace or something like it rush over it.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that the alien is a good guy. It just means that its job was a little bit harder by your unwillingness to, allow the procedure to happen. And so this was much more, I would expect, business as usual. This is just something that they're doing to you as far as calming you down. so that they can get through whatever it is they're getting through. Because even in the story that you described, where you saw those grays and they looked shocked to see you, I don't think that they're these flawless executors. I think sometimes things just don't go their way. Yeah. And so the idea that they're operating or doing a medical procedure and suddenly, it's become inconvenient to them because of the way that you're behaving, and that they would just want to make this process faster and smoother for everybody involved. And so they're going to sedate you to some extent. And that was like the first time he considered that. And I don't want to involve my own thoughts into somebody else's personal experience, but I just couldn't help but ask, why was it that he thought that this was a positive experience? And had he not considered that this was just business as usual, and that it was easier for them if you weren't cognizant and rebellious.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of these people that have these experiences, when they say they feel calm or even loving, I would not be surprised if they can make you feel a lot of different things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I got a lot of answers in regards to that as well. Some of the alien abductions and why they do what they do. I put it in the Secret War book. It's just too much to get into now, but there's a problem, and people are being victimized, but they've changed the conversation to not sound like that. And there's so much pushback on it. It's like, well, you don't know my beings. My beings, only raped me in the beginning, It's like, hold on. It's like, it's the conversation, if you get into it and the things that they've done and where they're going with it, there's a threat out there. There really is. They live here too now, and they're using us as like animals. And our government's aware, and they're seen right alongside of them sometimes. And they've been known to fake abductions themselves, to make people, they drug people to make it seem like, it's something else doing this. And they're trying to get information or do experiments on people. I mean, it's horrible. And, there's a lot of moving parts to it. And I don't think we'll ever get answers. When the UAP thing started coming forward, I didn't believe any of it from the start. And people are like, but Heidi, be happy they're addressing it. I'm like, they're lying through their teeth. And then somebody whistleblows that worked for the Arrow, group. It's like, come on, it's all, they have abused and used the technology they have access to and allowed us to die from cancers and the garbage when they live in an age of Star Trek that we all should be living in. They have so many advances, and they've been just enjoying the spoils, and we put them in office. We allow these people to rule us. We cannot trust that man is going to save us. They're going to save themselves. Those people are going to save themselves. And they're having a ball. Let me tell you, they're having a ball. And unfortunately, I've been aware of some of these things and some of the people that do know and that do enjoy it. And I learned my father was involved in the whole scenario of all of this stuff to an interesting extent, but not enjoying the spoils, but awareness, and so very much like the television program I mentioned, my life played out. It's just crazy, which is crazy. And you can't find that television show anywhere. You get the DVD, not even Blu-ray. It's from the creators of the X-Files. How about that? A big show. And you can't.
What was it called?
Millennium. And, but yeah. Just look up Agent Hollis. It's craziness. And so it's like, why things happen the way that they do, we'll never get the full picture, but we sure can protect ourselves and get on the right side of this battle, because our governments do not have our backs on this. People are afraid of a fake alien invasion story. Well, I'll tell you this, some of the people that call down crafts are calling the wrong guys down, and they're getting riddled with horrible things. So you have to discern as well. You can't just have an open invitation to anything to come to you. You have to be smarter about it and realize, just like people here, they're not all good. They don't always have the best intentions. So,
Well, Holly, or Heidi, I'm sorry. I really appreciate you taking the time to discuss all this with us. And honestly, it sounds like you have, you know, enough stories that would take several podcasts to unravel.
yes.
I'd be very interested in having you back in the future, especially it kind of sounds like you've got things that you're working on now.
Yes.
That you haven't released. Is that true?
Oh gosh, yeah. That would be great.
Yeah, in the future, I'd love to have you back on, Heidi. Is there any parting words that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, never give up. The light is a lot stronger than the dark. There's a lot of people who are looking to be of help too, who have been through and been in the scenarios that a lot of people have when they are facing some of these dark things. But God is real, Christ is real. The science fiction part is that there's somebody going to rescue us outside of those two. We can rely upon God, okay, Christ, and I can't stress that enough. And just keeping it real, and and also feel free to reach out if I could be of help. Definitely is something that I'm always aiming to do, and it's I dedicated my whole life essentially to making sure the word gets put out there the right and best way, and don't settle for less.
Heidi, one last time, where can the people find you?
They could go to my main website, which is HeidiHollis.com or shadowfolks.com, HeidiHollis. And my social media, put a 1 in front of my name at one Heidi Hollis. And also YouTube is just youtube.com/Heidi Hollis. And also my podcast, Dark Becomes Light, on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. People can tune in, and I take and give a lot of people's situations to give them different bits of advice. I'm not a psychic or a guru, but I do my best to answer people honestly, from angel encounters, near death, to shadow people, hat man stuff. And you will hear from me. I do answer my emails, and I do respond on my social media. That's how you and I met, right?
That is.
So thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Thank you very much, Heidi. This is an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for your time. And to the audience, thank you guys for watching The Ravens Watch. And until next time, Heidi, you have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.